Welcome back, everybody, once again to another episode of TJ Talks the News. Today is August 30th, 2021. I realized last Friday I said, I'll see you tomorrow. And then you did not see me tomorrow. And if you're listening to this, then you never see me. In fact, you never really see me anyways, because I'm not actually recording my face. I thought about it. I thought about doing a face cam for this. Problem is that I record these so early in the morning that I look like you don't want to see my face right now. I'm not sure anybody wants to see my face ever. My wife tries to convince me otherwise, but I'm not sure I believe her. But so yeah, I'm thinking I won't do the weekends. Kind of like the normal news, right? They just kind of take the weekend off. The news just stops Friday and then it picks back up on Mondays. So that's how we're going to do it here as well. So today we're checking out the Reddit WorldNews subreddit. I was thinking I should do some kind of international websites, news sources, stuff that isn't directed purely at an American audience, although a lot of things are directed, even international sources are directed at kind of an Americanized audience. And I was like, okay, I'll do BBC, but then BBC is it really that much different? You know? So I don't know. I figured this would be a good place to start for world news, and maybe we can branch out into some of the other sources that we find here. So, first story this is the top voted story on the Reddit World News subreddit today. Men not allowed to teach girls in Afghanistan. Taliban ban coeducation. I don't know why. Like, it amazes me. Something like a story like this garners, 6,000 upvotes or whatever it has. And then you see a story, there was a story about whistleblowers at the Environmental Protection Agency just greenlighting like everything. And basically doing no oversight or regulation. All these chemicals are being approved. And it got like 100 upvotes. Yet, this story, yeah, I mean... That's what the Taliban does, you guys. They don't believe in equality of the sexes. So you're going to have a lot of really terrible shit happening there. And I don't know, whenever I saw this, it reminded me of the way that Americans want a lot of crap, but then don't want to pay for it. They want their universal health care. Oh, but don't you dare raise my taxes. And it's kind of the same thing going on over here. We want our cake and we want to eat it too. We want to be over there and stop all this terrible stuff, but we don't actually want to have to pay the cost of that war in terms of casualties, in terms of the money, which is flawed to begin with because there's no way we can actually win that war. I mean, the way that you do it is with a permanent occupation, right? It would have to be permanent, I think. And it would have to be very, very heavy. I mean, I don't know. I joked with my son. I was like, the only way you win in Afghanistan is with a nuclear bomb. But maybe you can actually do it with like a permanent, presence there. But then at that point, you're not really... Is that really helping the country? I don't know. Isn't that just colonialism? Even if we're, helping the people there? That paternalistic... manifest destiny kind of mentality. White saviors coming to protect all the poor Afghan women who can't get an education. So I see these stories and I'm just kind of like, yeah, that's what's going to happen, and it's happening not just in Afghanistan but in countries all around the world. And maybe that's what the U.S. should be doing, is just trying to, be Captain America, go out there and just stop. I mean, if we were Captain America... Wait, no, that's Captain Planet that I'm thinking of, right? I was going to say, we would be saving the world. But we can't be a superhero. Can we? I don't know. Man. Part of me really wants to go over there and just save all these poor women. But, again, it's just not... It's not realistic. It's not pragmatic. My brother would say, well, pragmatism is a dirty word. But I don't know. I don't know. But the real story here, I think, is that this is the top story, right? It's also in India today. It's an article from India. Interesting. I wonder why that might be big news. I also wonder, now that I'm thinking about it, how populations might throw off like the voting algorithms and stuff, just based on sheer population, like India having so many people. I don't know, not something I've really thought about. I think the internet is still kind of contained to some degree, but I don't know enough about this kind of stuff. Like, I'm fairly certain that if you're in China, you're accessing a kind of different internet than if you're in the US. I'm not sure if that applies to other countries as well. It probably depends on how strong the firewall is, right? New Zealand COVID-19 conspiracy group in disarray after almost nobody turns up to anti-lockdown protest. You know, I've heard that it's not just the US that these crazy people are everywhere. It seems to be predominantly in the US. I do know that they're, I have seen some stuff, I think, out of Germany, out of France. Oh yeah, they had that pretty big protest in France, right? So maybe it is more common, and I just don't pay enough attention to international news. I'm not sure. But what was it? Was it New Zealand? Maybe it was Denmark. There was, which I know are nowhere near each other, but there were. I've heard a few stories about a few different countries being able to kind of open up again because they have enough vaccines. They shut down. They took all the steps they needed to step, and of course, New Zealand has been one of those from the beginning. I think they were doing good for like 6 months, but then they got like one case and locked down again. So, would a lockdown work in the U.S.? My gut reaction says absolutely not. Even if Trump or Biden or whoever had attempted a national lockdown, I don't think it would have really worked. It's definitely not going to work now. Which I just saw. Maybe we'll come across it later on, so I'm not going to talk about it yet. China cuts the amount of time minors can spend playing video games. So I've had a number of students want to write about video games and violence, right? It's a pretty popular topic, particularly among male students, it seems, younger male students. And a lot of them find research out of China that deals with this topic. And I always tell them, be skeptical because the Chinese government as a whole seems to have a very anti-video game kind of stance. And I have read some stuff about manipulation of the data in these studies. Because there was one study that was going around that tried to draw a pretty strong correlation between playing violent video games and violent behavior. But then it was there was something wrong with the study in the way that it had been run basically to try to manipulate the results, right? And I don't know. Any research coming out of China, I think we got to be skeptical of. At the same time, I'm like, well, maybe we should be skeptical of any research coming out of anywhere, right? But especially with video games, and I don't know what it is about video games that it corrupts the youth. Maybe it's not productive. It doesn't contribute to the betterment of the state. I'm not sure what it is. They see it as too much of a Western influence. I saw another post the other day. I think it was a card game. Oh, it was the Witcher card game that's going to be released in China, I think, and they have like their own edited, censored Chinese version, and like all of the sex stuff, all of the violence. So it was just like pictures of people like where they should be holding a sword, but they had removed the sword. So it looked absolutely ridiculous. But those are the kinds of lengths that they're going to censor and moderate the consumption of video games and other games and stuff, and just different media forms, which I think is fascinating. And of course, we do our own form of censorship here in the U.S. It's always really fascinating. I used to do this thing where I would show students commercials from different cultures and stuff, and they're always blown away by how common nudity is in commercials outside the U.S., and then how prevalent violence seems to be in ours. So, I think every government, every culture is probably manipulating the media that we consume to some degree, even if it's a kind of organic manipulation where things become popular simply because that's the mainstream at the moment. But organic manipulation sounds freaking stupid, man. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay. But I don't know, I just think that's interesting. I've thought about limiting my son's playtime, which we do, but it's not like we do it in the sense that if he hasn't completed his other responsibilities, he can't do his video games and stuff, right? But if he's handled all of his responsibilities, then he can sit there and play on his computer for 4 hours. And I thought about maybe we should not do that. There are certainly some studies to suggest that it's not very healthy. Doing it would make me feel like a big hypocrite, though, because I still will play for hours at a time. So I can't really criticize him for behavior that I engage in, which then is maybe like, well, maybe I need to change my behavior then and be a better role model for him. But then, I don't know. I'll probably just go watch TV, which... No, that's not true. Dude, I cannot stay still for more than like 20 minutes these days. I don't know how some people can just like sit and watch things. I can listen to things, but I have to be doing something else. And I feel like I'm turning to my mom, because my mom is just one of those people who's like constantly just doing chores and stuff. And that's kind of what I'm turning into. And it's amazing because my house has never been cleaner and I've never been in better shape. But it would be nice to like actually be able to sit down and like watch a movie, you know? I don't know how many shows I've tried to start with my wife now, and I maybe make it through like a couple episodes just to where like she's able to like get into the show, and then I just kind of like I just can't sit and watch it. I just lose all interest whatsoever. And then she ends up having to watch the whole thing and gets mad at me like, you made me watch this in the first place. But yeah. Anyways, oh, interesting. So we have two stories, in fact, about this China cutting the online gaming to 1 hour a day. I wonder how they're going to enforce that. Maybe you have to like log in with like a username, and then once your time's up, your time's up. That would be insane. Sounds totally like something China would do. I'm crapping all over China, but honestly, how much? I know so little about China, and for all I know, most of the stuff that I know about China is just all Western propaganda. It does seem like they're doing some pretty terrible shit over there, but I you know, I'm basing my conclusions off of stuff I read in the news. So I did have these two students from China, two of the hardest working students I have ever had. I mean, and they were so incredibly respectful. Honestly, I don't know. As a teacher, I feel like I'm pretty easy to get along with, but maybe it's because I come from a family of teachers. I don't know. Even when I was a bad student, I was still never disrespectful in the classroom because I know how hard of a job it is. But boy, there are some people who just don't seem to have any respect whatsoever. And it's like, okay, I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. They've probably been mistreated by all of their teachers in the past. Maybe they're being forced to be there by a parent or something. Maybe they're overworked from their job. I always try to give them the benefit of the doubt. But it's like if you're sitting in class and talking on your phone or something, like what? And then the teacher asks you to stop and you're like, oh, 1 moment, play. Who are you exactly? Like, I don't know. And is it just me? Am I just getting old and curmudgeonly? Am I just getting I don't know. I'm such a bad teacher because I'm so bad at, and a bad parent for that matter, because I'm so bad at being an authority figure. I just don't like telling other people what to do. And it's such a big part of being a parent and a teacher, it seems. On the other hand, I've been a parent for 13 years. He's still alive. He's doing pretty well. I've been a teacher now for almost the same amount of time, and I'm still teaching, so maybe I'm being too hard on myself, but it sometimes sucks, man. These people, can you please put your phone away? I'm just like, no, I can pull up my dad voice. Trust me, I do. I do have a dad voice, and it's pretty fucking scary too. You don't want to see it. I just don't like pulling it out. I don't like calling it a dad voice either, because that kind of implies that dads are supposed to be like mean or something. But dads don't have to be mean. Dads can be super duper fun. Okay, let's see if we can get to some more news today. A judge asked a mother if she got the coronavirus vaccine. She said no, and he revoked custody of her son. Holy crap. This looks like a brand new story. We can already see it's garnered almost 200 comments. It's probably going to be top of the page here pretty soon. One story, and I'm not seeing it here, but it may come up later on, but I'm going to bring it up now anyways, is about Fauci, who's in charge of the coronavirus response, saying that he's going to recommend that vaccines be mandated for children in schools right as soon as they're approved for children. And I'm just like, oh man, if he was getting death threats before, like he's going to need to be traveling around in an armored tank at this point. And it's really sad because the children have already been vaccinated for polio and smallpox and all the other measles, whatever vaccines we give nowadays. The children have already been vaccinated for them. The parents, most of them at least, the vast majority, did not protest to those vaccines. So it's just about the coronavirus vaccine that they're going to get angry about. And that anger is being driven purely by misinformation that's being put out there by lots of unsavory characters. And man, it must suck to be a healthcare professional, to be a medical professional right now. My wife is, but she works in a specialty doctor's office. So even though coronavirus has added extra work and stress for them, it's nothing compared, I'm sure, to working like in an ER or something. And it's being driven by just sheer stupidity. I hate to call it stupidity, man. I want to blame poverty. I want to blame religion. I want to blame lots of other things besides the individual stupid person. I want to see this as the result of these systemic forces that are acting upon us, because that makes it a lot easier for me. Again, I don't like the authority stuff. I don't like being mean to other people. I don't like telling other people what to do. So if these people are doing this as the result of forces beyond their control, it makes my job a lot easier. I don't have to be the bad guy, but for fuck's sake, man. At some point, the individual does have agency, right? Maybe, perhaps. I don't know. But this is interesting to me. So he revoked the custody of her son. I feel like, okay, we gotta click on this one. So Washington Post article. I don't think we're gonna be able to read it because they have a paywall up. So there has to be a lot more to this story. The headline is probably just trying to get clicks and stuff. There were probably other factors that put the son at risk, would be my guess. Maybe this is just a judge who is going to take this virus seriously, and I applaud that judge if that is the case. In which case, hey, can you go do this to all of the government officials refusing to close down our schools right now and that are putting our children at risk? Can you do that too, maybe? I'd love to hear what other people think about closing the schools. I brought this up before, and I got really angry about it because I feel like the schools should be shut down. And I'm trapped as a parent right now. It's like if I bring my daughter home, I can't work, so we can't pay rent. We go homeless, especially with the eviction moratorium being out. So it's like I'm trapped. I basically have to send my children to school now. Friday, I went there to pick them up. Not a single teacher wearing a mask. Not a single teacher wearing a mask. The kids were all wearing masks. So I feel very trapped as a parent, and I feel like the safest thing to do, if the goal is to care for all of our children and to keep all of our children safe, the best thing to do would be to shut down schools again. And please, I would love to hear from somebody to tell me, no, you're wrong, and here's why. And my mom has tried to convince me with the data, right? That even though we were expecting schools to be these mass spreader scenarios, they turned out not to be. That states that kept schools open had roughly the same coronavirus numbers. Now, again, this data is based off of the initial strain from last year. But I guess my response to that is, and I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but this is just a point that I can't get past, and it's just causing me so much inner turmoil right now. So it's like, okay, so the numbers were comparable, but did children get sick? Did they get sick at school? Would they have been safer at home? And I think the answer to the first two questions is yes. The answer to that third question is a lot harder, though. Some of them, yes. Some of them, probably not. And that's something that's important for me to keep in mind, is that for some children in this country, school is a safe haven. It's where they can retreat away from abuse at home. Some students are homeless. It's where they can go to get a meal and some warmth or some cool air. And so closing down the schools is going to hurt those students. I mean, a hybrid, I think there is a hybrid option. But again, that doesn't really help me, because I would need to be able to be on unemployment to take care of my daughter, and unemployment runs out not tomorrow, but Wednesday, I think. So I feel very trapped right now, and I would love some reassurance, like, hey, don't freak out. Here's why kids being in school is not that big of a deal. Because to me, it seems like a pretty big fucking deal. As far as revoking custody, I mean, I don't know. This just seems like there are a lot of reasons why parents should have their children have custody revoked. I mean, you could see feeding them all the crap that we feed them nowadays as reason enough, as a form of child abuse, given what we know about the impact that sugar and stuff has on the body. Is that reason enough to revoke custody? Maybe. You could probably compare it to like secondhand smoke. If you were smoking, in the same house as your child, would that be reason enough to revoke custody? And coronavirus is arguably even more dangerous. It can kill you tomorrow. Whereas secondhand smoke and sugar probably are going to take a few years. So maybe this isn't as extreme as some people might take it to mean. Honestly, as the years go by, I am more and more a fan of my brother's idea, which is to do licensing for parenting. It sounds so dystopian. It sounds so freaking crazy. But the fact that we require licensing to drive a car, but not to care for a human life, is fascinating. Fascinating. And it's based on how many freaking terrible parents I've seen. Alberta feed stores inundated with calls for ivermectin over false claims livestock dewormer treats COVID. Yes, this is the world that we live in now. And I believe that there are a number of officials now touting it as an effective treatment for COVID. 3 children killed in U.S. airstrike on ISIS-K suicide bombers targeting Kabul airport. So this was kind of the big story yesterday. There was the terror attack. Do we call it a terror attack? I don't know. I don't know. Just that whole word. You could call basically anything a terror. Did it terrorize you? Yeah, I know that there are legal definitions and stuff, but I don't even know. I don't think those legal definitions are applied very consistently, anyways. But there was the bombing, right, which killed 13 service members and I think well over 100 Afghan people. And then the U.S. has been retaliating with drone strikes. One of them was what they are claiming was a preventative drone strike that took out a car full of suicide bombers. Now, in the process of destroying this alleged suicide bomber car, we killed a number of innocent civilians as well. Again, innocent. Allegedly, I feel like I just need to say allegedly. This whole story is alleged. It's an alleged story because the reality is we don't know what the hell is going on down there, and trusting any intelligence, I think at this point is problematic. And I don't know, especially in these kinds of situations. I just feel like we need to give it time before we react too strongly about anything. But this is another story where I don't know. I've been reading the comments and people are like, "Well, this prevented an attack that could have killed hundreds." And if the intelligence is to be believed, yes, that's true. And maybe there's no good option here. Prevent, it's the classic the guy on the train problem, right? The ethical dilemma. Uh, do you steer the train away from the guy and potentially doom that whole entire train to death, or do you let the train run over the guy and save the 100 people? Speaking of which, any fans of the show The Good Place out there? It's one of my wife's favorite shows. It's another one of these shows that I started with her because I heard that it was kind of a show about, to some degree, philosophy, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I started watching, and then I got bored, and she finished watching it, and I would just watch the occasional episode with her or whatever. But you know how I've talked about my inability to commit to ideas? That's Chidi from the show. If you've ever watched the show, there's this character Chidi. But that's basically his thing. He can never make decisions. He can just never commit to anything, and that is me. I am Chidi. So if you've ever seen The Good Place, just when you think of TJ, think Chidi. TJ, Chidi. I'm not black, but still, we have a lot in common there. So I don't know. Maybe and Chidi's whole thing is he's a philosophy professor who specializes in ethics, and he has to teach the character on the show about what it means to lead an ethical, moral life. And this is just one of those classic dilemmas. But even the train thing is too simple, right? It's even more complex here. Because so we save the train full of people by taking out the terrorists. But in the process, we've likely created 36 more terrorists who are going to do 36 more suicide car bombs. And maybe that would have happened regardless of whether or not we blew this one up. But at least from what I've read, that a lot of the people who join these terrorist cells have personal reasons for doing so because they've lost a family member or friend or whatever in an American bombing. Now, again, I don't know how true that is. I don't know how accurate that is. It's possible that they're joining for a lot of the same reasons that young people might join the military here in the US, because they're just trying to freaking survive. And so I don't know. When I saw the initial drone strike in retaliation or whatever, it just kind of made me sick to my stomach. It's like, no. Violence begets violence. An eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. How many times do we have to go through this lesson before our leaders learn it? And maybe that's too simple. There are moments where violence is a good solution. This just didn't seem like one for me. It seemed purely driven by revenge. And that should not be the thing driving our military policy. Hearing Biden say things like, we're going to hunt you down and America will not be intimidated as we're retreating from a war, it just brought the flashbacks to Bush and stuff. It was so gross in my mind. On the other hand, you think about the parents who have lost, the parents of those 13 service members who were killed as we're retreating. I'm sure they were happy to some degree. And maybe this is simply about fulfilling their needs, their desire. I don't know. I just feel like dropping more bombs is like the last thing we want to do. And I'm seeing stuff like, oh, terrorist attacks may become more likely now that the U.S. is leaving Afghanistan. And I'm like, well, at this point, we probably deserve it. So, I need somebody to talk some sense into me, please. Tell me I'm not being too crazy. Because that's my general sentiment right now is all the Afghanistan stuff. I'm just kind of like, maybe it's just I get angry because it seems like it's like nobody's been paying attention at all to anything. I feel like I always hate my memory. Like I feel like I forget everything I did the day before. But boy, it seems like my memory is a lot better than freaking most people's. Hey, look at that. Well, government officials breaking rules. Nothing new there, but this says new COVID variant detected in South Africa. Most mutated variant so far. We're going to have like some COVID awards going around. The South African is going to win the award for most mutated variant. The Delta is going to win the award for most deadly or most contagious, maybe. It's still kind of up in the air. Who's going to win that one? I don't know. It's just the way that they phrased that was interesting. But yeah, fantastic. More variants. And that's the other thing about like not shutting things down is, or I think it was Denmark that is going to like reopen things, and they're like celebrating this reopening. And people were saying like, hey, your government may want to slow down there because other countries have done this. They've like, okay, we beat COVID. But then 2 months later, they're having to shut down again. I feel like the U.S. was just like, no, we're not going to do it at all whatsoever. People can die, whatever. It'll save us tax money on all the money that we're going to have to pay out on Social Security or whatever, right? I could totally see that being like the actual plan, right? It's like, oh my gosh, Social Security is going to bankrupt the country. Well, let's just let all the old people die then. But yeah, this is that there's the possibility for newer, deadlier variants. Seems to me, it's like, well, let's just be as cautious as possible. Now, if we use like the flu as the 1909, 1919 flu, it was 1914 flu. Gosh, I forget the year. The one that happened about 100 years ago that people like to compare COVID to. Then it took a few years for it to go away, and I think it did eventually mutate into the flu that we see today. And it became less deadly, still deadly, but less deadly. And I think that's what they're hoping happens with COVID too. And I feel like I didn't really get too much news. We're gonna do some rapid speed headline reading. China bans exams for 6-year-old school children. So wait, they're getting rid of video games and tests? Oh my gosh, that might be a decent trade-off, right? You cannot play video games anymore, but you no longer have to buy Scantrons. Female journalist flees Afghanistan following groundbreaking TV interview with Taliban spokesman. 2,200-year-old Alexander the Great statue discovered in Alexandria. Well, that's convenient. What a coincidence. Oh my gosh. Ukrainian troops rescue Canada-bound Afghans in daring operation. Pakistan NSA warns of second 9/11 if West doesn't recognize Taliban, then says misquoted. Oh man. Pakistan is interesting. Maybe we'll get to talk about them one of these days. Cool. Yeah, more COVID variants. Anyways, you guys, that is gonna be it for me for today. Thanks for watching or listening, and I will see you all tomorrow.